Sleep peptides are everywhere right now. In the biohacking communities, the longevity forums, all the podcasts, everyone seems to be talking about them. And the pitch is compelling. Compounds that signal to our brain to produce more deep, slow wave sleep, that restore our growth hormone levels, that recalibrate our circadian rhythm at a cellular level. But before I tell you what I actually found, you need to know who you're hearing this from. I'm a sleep coach who has spent 10 years with a debilitating insomnia. I've spent 180 grand trying to heal myself. And in that process, I spent 12 years at peptide clinics. I've personally used more than 15 of these compounds, and I've spent thousands of dollars on them. I had proper medical monitoring. I worked with real practitioners who knew what they were doing. I did it right. And today I want to give you the most honest take on sleep peptides you'll find anywhere online. Some of this genuinely works, and some of it doesn't, at least not in the way that most people talk about it. I'm going to give you both sides. By the end of this video, you'll have a clearer picture than anything else you've read or watched on this topic. So let's get into it. Before I get into my honest take, let's make sure we're working with the same foundation. What are peptides, right? They're short chain amino acids, essentially small fragments of complete proteins. Think of them as signaling molecules. They don't force a biological response in the same way a synthetic drug does. Instead, they mimic or amplify signals your body is already trying to send. That's a meaningful distinction. It's a big part of why the people in the longevity and biohacking space I've gotten so excited about them. They feel more biologically aligned with how the body actually works. And so here are the main ones that people are using right now for sleep. DSIP, this is delta sleep inducing peptide. This one occurs naturally in the body and was first isolated in the 1970s. It's the most studied sleep specific peptide we have. Its job is to signal to the brain to produce more of that deep slow wave sleep, which is one of the more restorative phases of the night. Next is epitalone, a tetrapeptide originally derived from the pineal gland tissue. And its primary mechanism is circadian rhythm. It supports melatonin production and helps normalize your sleep-wake cycle. It's a big topic in the longevity conversation specifically. Last ones I want to talk about are ipamorelin and CJC, and these are the growth hormone secretagogues, meaning they stimulate the pituitary gland to release more growth hormone. They don't sedate you directly. The logic is that roughly 70% of your growth hormone is released during sleep at night. And deep sleep and growth hormone production reinforce one another. You optimize one and you potentially support the other. So why are all these trending right now? Partially because the longevity conversation has gone mainstream. Biohacking is no longer fringe, but also because people are exhausted from trying everything else. They've done the melatonin, they've done the magnesium, they've worked through every sleep hygiene checklist on the internet and nothing's stuck. So here's something that sounds different, targeted, and biologically scientific. I understand the appeal completely. I chased it for years. I want to give this section the respect it deserves. I'm not here to dismiss research. There is real science here and some is genuinely interesting. So first on DSIP. Animal studies are compelling. Early research found that DSIP significantly increases deep sleep in test subjects. More interesting is studies show that when DSIP was blocked in sleep-deprived rats, the normal recovery increased in slow wave deep sleep and growth hormone release was also blocked. So that suggests that DSIP may actually have a real physiological trigger with deep sleep, not just a compound that artificially mimics it. Now the human data gets more complicated. One controlled trial in chronic insomnia patients using intranasal DSIP for over 4 weeks, and it reported meaningful improvements in slow wave sleep, total sleep time, and sleep efficiency. Those were real numbers there. But the study hasn't been independently replicated, and 4 weeks tells us almost nothing about the long-term results. In an earlier double-blind trial, which was more measured, the authors themselves concluded that the sleep improvement under DSIP treatment was limited clinical significance. So even the best studied sleep peptide give us mixed signals on the research. As far as ipamorelin and CJC, the physiological logic here is cleaner. Growth hormone naturally declines roughly 15% per decade after age 40. And since deep sleep and growth hormone production are bidirectional, each one supports the other. And that decline can genuinely affect your sleep architecture over time. Ipamorelin is worth understanding in detail because of how selective it is. Most growth hormone secretagogues raise cortisol as a side effect, which actively disrupts sleep quality. Ipamorelin stimulates growth hormone without the cortisol spike, and that selectively matters a lot in practice. So what does the research actually suggest these compounds might help? Well, adults over 40 with documented growth hormone decline and deteriorating slow wave sleep. Other adults with age-related circadian disruption and declining melatonin. That's ipamorelin's strongest clinical case use. And then physically active adults with sleep fragmentation, where some peptides like glycine have randomized controlled trial evidence around them. That's a very specific profile, and it doesn't describe most of the people currently buying peptides online, which is why what I'm about to say next is the part of this conversation that is missing. I'll say what I share so far is an optimistic take, and there is a side of this that the biohacking community is almost entirely not talking about. And if you're using peptides right now or thinking about starting them, you need to hear this before you go any further. The most honest thing I can say about sleep peptides right now is that long-term human safety data largely doesn't exist. Most studies are 2 to 12 weeks. Most don't have independent replication. The compounds with the longest track records have been studied primarily in animals, not in humans over years. An emergency room physician and medical toxicologist put it pretty plainly. Almost all of them across the board lack high quality human data, especially long-term safety data. The other concern is hormone disruption. Hormone disruption is a real concern. Growth hormone secretagogues work by stimulating our pituitary gland, a gland that operates inside a tightly regulated feedback loop. Sustained external pressure on that system raises legitimate concerns about that receptor downregulation, meaning your body adapts by producing less on its own. This isn't just theory, it's built directly into clinical protocols. Practitioners who prescribe these compounds structure dosing as 5 days on, 2 days off, with many of them, with mandatory 4-week breaks between cycles. That schedule exists because the disruption risk is real and recognized. Another thing is the product quality is a serious problem. The majority of peptides available to consumers are not produced under pharmacological grade conditions. So independent reviews have found that 30% of unregulated products contain improper dosing, contaminants, or mislabeling. One analysis found lead contamination in BPC 157. Most of what's sold online is synthesized overseas, repackaged, labeled for research purposes only, which legally shifts all the liability onto you. So the regulatory picture is also actively shifting. And let's put a big caveat here of politics. But 2023, the FDA classified 19 of these peptides as Category 2 substances, significant safety concerns. And they banned compounding pharmacies from producing them. The ban that is currently being partially reversed under political pressure. The science hasn't changed, the politics did. And that can go both ways. I'm not choosing sides here. An FDA advisory committee is scheduled to review 7 of these peptides in July 2026. So the answers aren't in yet for what that's worth. But more than any of this, here's the deeper problem, and it's more conceptual. Beyond the data gaps, the hormonal risks, the product quality issues, there's a core problem with how peptides are being marketed for sleep. When your sleep is fractured because your nervous system is in a state of chronic threat. When your body isn't resting because some part of it doesn't feel safe enough to let go. Adding a downstream chemical signal doesn't change the upstream state. You're pushing a signal into the system that it's actively resisting. And that's what I keep seeing in my practice. Now I want to step out of the research to what I actually see happen with people. There's a specific pattern that keeps showing up. I've spent over 8 years coaching people through sleep recovery. And during that time, I had a real front row seat to what actually happens when clients combine the coaching work with clinical peptide protocols. And here's my breakdown. The people that peptides helped were those whose sleep issues were relatively recent, not years long, entrenched patterns, people who had already done significant amount of inner work and were using peptides to optimize that final layer. For those people, they got some results, measurable shifts in supporting overall energy and better recovery. I saw it, I'm not dismissing it. But for the people that peptides didn't move the needle for, this is 90% of everyone I've ever worked with, including myself. Because people who have been struggling with sleep for years, sometimes decades, people whose sleep issues were woven into the anxiety, unprocessed stress, the nervous system that has been running on high alert for a long time, for that group, and this is the majority of people who will find this video, peptides consistently under-delivered. And here's the pattern they kept repeating. When you continue to outsource healing your sleep to another pill, or in this case a shot, it's just burying the real underlying problems down further. And what I discovered when peptides didn't work for my own sleep, That's the most important thing I'm going to say in this video. So let's get personal. I spent over 10 years barely sleeping. Years of lying awake, scared, anxious, frustrated, angry. Days where getting out of bed felt like moving a mountain. And I spent 180 grand chasing those answers. Peptides were part of that search. Multiple clinics, proper monitoring, real practitioners, multiple compounds over years. And as for my sleep, it didn't move the needle. Some minor things around recovery, small shifts in how I felt physically, but the core problem, the thing I was trying desperately to fix, didn't improve. And for a long time, I thought that was because it was a me problem. A different compound, different dose, different clinic. Until I started to understand something, that my body wasn't struggling to produce deep sleep because of peptide deficiency. It was struggling because my nervous system didn't feel safe enough to let go. Sleep is not something you do, it's something your body allows when it decides that the threats are over. And after years of suppressing emotion, a life built around achievement and approval, stress that I never actually processed, my system was stuck in a state of chronic vigilance. No compound on earth can teach your nervous system that it's safe. That's not what they do. So when I finally started doing the actual work, the emotional work, the nervous system work, the inner work that I've been avoiding for a long time, my sleep started to come back. Slowly at first, then more consistently. Not because I found the right compound, because I learned to listen to what my body had been trying to tell me, instead of constantly trying to override it. And more than just my sleep changing, my whole life changed, because the things that were keeping me awake were the same things that were keeping me from actually living. So where does that leave you? If you've been watching this, you're probably in the thick of it, exhausted, frustrated, trying to figure out what actually works. And I want to give you something real, not a new product, not a different protocol, the actual framework that moves the needle. And I'll keep this quick. You've stayed through this video thus far and you've earned a straight answer. To heal sleep, nervous system regulation is the foundation. Not the supplement nor the protocol. It's the physiological state change your body is in. Sleep happens when your autonomic nervous system shifts from the sympathetic activation, out of that fight or flight, into what we call a ventral vagal state. Safety, restoration, rest. No peptide makes that shift for you. We go there by teaching your body slowly, repeatedly, that it's safe to let go. The emotional processing matters more than most people want to hear. What keeps you awake at 3 a.m. is rarely about sleep. It's more about what hasn't been dealt with yet. The pressures you're carrying, the emotions you've been overriding, the version of yourself you're presenting that doesn't quite feel aligned to you. Your body knows, and it won't fully rest until you start listening. On top of that, lifestyle compounds over time. Consistent sleep timing, exercise earlier in the day, avoiding late eating, natural light in the morning. They're not glamorous, but they're practices we hold because they're building an environment that the nervous system can actually settle inside of. All of this is what we go deep on inside my Healing Sleep at its root program, my sleep recovery community. It's actual root cause work, the nervous system regulation, the emotional processing, and a group of people who understand what this actually feels like because they're in it too. There's over 20 courses, workbooks, live calls with me every week, and a community that will make you feel less alone in this. If you're ready to give this a try, the link's in the description. If this video gave you something today, drop a comment. Tell me where you're at. Tell me what part of this hit for you. I read them all. So until I see you in the next video, rest well.